All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, is everybody there? Hello, Christian.
I'm here.
This
I'm here,
is
Pete.
Peter Eastway calling Christian Fletcher in the West. We are here with the Datacolor Webinar, and we have had a few little interesting technical hiccups getting us going, so my apologies for the tardiness. We're about 2 minutes behind, but that's probably good. Everybody managed to get themselves a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, or in Christian's case, maybe a cup of Bonox. Is that what you like, Christian?
Well,
I
yes,
can't
Pete.
hear Christian replying to me, so I'm just talking to young Luke. Do we have him coming through?
I'm here, Pete.
No. Hey, Christian?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hear Christian answering? That's great. I'm glad you can hear Christian answering because I can't hear him answering. No, I can't hear him at all. So it's going to be rather hard for us to have a conversation. How are you going, Christian?
I'm good. Can you hear me now?
Oh, it's going to be very, very difficult. People can hear you, I know. Click to mute yourself.
Well, anyway, Pete,
Okay.
we don't need to hear you. We don't need to hear from you.
Hello, what's happening now?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear myself. Christian.
Yes.
Sorry, mate. We're having some wonderful fun and games here.
Yeah, I'm here. So, I'm here, and
yeah, no, I've got a major problem with this because I've got the feedback coming direct. Yeah, so I can't hear anything at all. This is rather embarrassing, one might say. So now I'm just pressing it into my computer, and I get no sound at all from there. That's not happening at all. So I'm just getting feedback absolutely everywhere. This one here was working before, and we're having some problems. Okay, so we have to go back to that one, and I just have to look after it. You're not getting any feedback? Okay. How's that, Christian?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can't hear anything, so I'm going to have to put it into your computer. I've got your headsets. All right. You should see us all here, ladies and gentlemen. This is fun and games, let me tell you. Okay.
Are you on a PC, Pete?
I am on a PC, and I think that must be the problem. I'm going to go Apple. So, Christian, we're talking about PCs and all that sort of stuff. One of the things I've discovered when working with you, and I should let the audience know that Christian Fletcher is one of Australia's leading landscape photographers, has an amazing gallery down at Dunsborough, down in Western Australia. It really is a credit to him. Fantastic location, 2 stories, amazing photographs inside, brilliant presentation, looks sensational. And I think he carries that through a little bit with his wardrobe when he's out on location. And that's why I'm looking at this photograph here of you, young Christian, and saying, is there a particular attire that you need to be a good landscape photographer?
Well, there is, Pete. It is very important to look good out there when it's pitch black and you're waiting for the sun to come up, and then of course you've got to look the part, you've got to look nice, and then oh, hang on, what's this? What are those red shorts all about? I guess you're going for the high vis look, were you?
Well, I just wondered whether I passed or whether I sort of lose out. I mean, I'm trying to look cool like you, but I don't know whether I do it.
Well, actually, Pete, that photo that you've got of me is taken. Hey, hang on, it's that was an old photo. So I wear skinny jeans these days, mate. That's the fashion. See
skinny jeans, right? Okay.
Yeah,
I've got some skinny shorts on as well there. That's well. So we did another series of self-portraits with our ND5 group, and it was all a matter of looking prim and proper. You did a pretty good job. But I just wondered whether you had any comment about this 3rd photograph that we've got coming up.
Well, actually, I just been looking at your website, and I was dry reaching, so that's when that photo was taken.
Very, very good, very good. All right, well, that was a little bit of a light-hearted introduction. This photograph blessed a billboard down in towards Dunsborough Way, wasn't it, when we had our ND5 exhibition for the Southwest?
That's right.
Where was it shot, and was the earth really that red?
Well, Pete, I do like to use Photoshop, but I mean, the earth was that red. It just wasn't that red on this particular day, so I had to make it look a little bit redder than what it was. But this was taken down at the Stirling Ranges, which is down in the southwest of Western Australia, and it's actually probably some of the nicest mountain scenery you get in Australia, I believe. Anyway, it's bluff knoll stands out. It's about 1,000. It's only about 1,000 meters above the ground, but there's nothing else around it that's high. So it's a beautiful place to photograph, and you always get good light. It has its own little cloud system that comes in, and there's always something nice happening. And so we went down there to take these photos, and we also had the plane there, of course. So getting up in the air was the other thing that we got to do while we were down there on this project.
Okay, and what sort of equipment do you put in your gadget bag, your camera bag? What are you using most of the time?
Well, most of the time it's the Phase 1 IQ 180 digital back, and then I've got the 645 DF body and a range of Phase 1 and Snyder lenses. So that's my mainstay. I mean, that's obviously I believe is the best camera system in the world. As far as the quality of images, it's pretty hard to beat it.
There's an interesting query on that. I mean, you're using Schneider lenses on the Phase 1 camera, but the Phase 1 has lenses of its own.
Yes, that's right. Yes, they're I'm not sure actually. I'm not even sure if the prices are different. But when I bought my kit, I got one Snyder lens and a couple of Phase 1 lenses, and they say the Snyder lenses are better, but I'm pretty happy with the Phase lenses I've got. And as long as you're doing the right post-production and you shoot right, most of them are fairly close anyway. So anything that's slightly not as good with the Phase lenses would be picked up and corrected.
So when you say shoot right, maybe we need to expand a little bit there in terms of what you mean by shooting right. I mean, what are the settings or what are the approaches you take to making sure, because we look at this photograph and those little sheep there, I don't know whether everybody who's watching can realise that they're sheep, but when you look at that photograph up as a big 60-inch print, you can see their 4 legs, you can see the dreadlocks, and that they haven't quite been shorn yet on some of them. It's incredibly sharp. What are the techniques that you need to get that crispness in the pictures?
Oh, it's mostly to do with choosing the right aperture, the right shutter speed for the job, and making sure that the camera's sturdy on the tripod, all those sort of little things. And when you're shooting with a Phase 1, and I realised quickly that it was all about the nth degree. And if you do anything wrong, if you slack with your technique, you'll be seen in the file. So I'm generally shooting with this lens. This image was shot with a Snyder 80mm, which I consider one of the sharpest lenses I've ever used. I know you've got the same lens, and I think you agree it's a beautiful lens.
It is indeed.
And so I'm usually shooting that lens at about f8. And this aerial shot, obviously, I had to speed the shutter speed up. ISO was about 200, which on the Phase 1 is pretty much, well, it's all you need. Let's just say it's all you need. That's being diplomatic, isn't it, Pete?
Yeah. Well, we would like faster ISOs from time to time. Let's face it. And I know Phase 1 with the IQ 250 and the CMOS sensor, you can do exactly that. But I think you were also going to talk about some of the other cameras that you use. I did see you wandering around the gorges of Carrigini over the last couple of days with a smaller camera on occasion. What was that all about?
Yeah, I'm using the new Fujifilm X-T1. I've always been a fan of Fuji. I started off with a Fuji GX617 film panoramic camera, and that was my mainstay. Basically built my career. So I used that for, I don't know, a decade or whatever it was. I can't remember. And so that was my mainstay. And when the X100 came out, I got really excited. I was looking at this little compact camera with a really nice little sensor and all these other whiz-bang things about it. And then I stuck with Fuji, went from there to the X Pro 1, then I went to the XM1. I ended up with 2 XM1s, which I really loved because it had the flippy screen, and I love the flippy screen. I don't think they call them flippy screens, but I like to call them a flippy screen. And of course then the XT1 came out, which sort of combined everything, and I still had a flippy screen, so I had to buy that. So I love my Fuji cameras, they're just brilliant.
Okay, and it's obviously a different way of shooting. And I look at one of these the next photo we've got of the 4 little lambs or sheep down the bottom there. I'm not exactly sure what they're up to or why you found them. But I guess this is more of a grab shot rather than a landscape?
Yeah, this was actually shot
or
on
a landscape, should I say.
Yeah. Well, being a vegetarian, Pete, you probably don't have much knowledge of these little lammies down here, but let me just say that they were real. They weren't blown up, and they weren't cut and paste. It was one of those moments where, you know, that decisive moment. It was actually a bit of luck, and I think photography is a lot about luck and being in the right place. So, you know, sometimes you just can't plan these things to happen. But I was photographing with the Canon 1DS Mark II at the time, had the 400mm lens on, and I was driving around just shooting from the car window. So it was raining when I took this shot. I saw the lambs, I saw the tree, had the 400mm on. I looked at it and I thought, this is it. I took, I think, 2 or 3 frames and just happened to get these guys lined up. And the last shot, they were walking out of the frame. So it was one of those moments where you just really had to shoot quickly. But the file was really, really bad. It was quite muddy. It was kind of a light browny, greeny color. So it wasn't what you call a great file. But I managed to sort of bring most of that back with Photoshop, and you know, add a bit of a vignette and desaturate the colors and, you know, work it. But this is quite an old shot now. This goes back a way. So, you know, I was still kind of a raw recruit with Photoshop, and entered the APAs with this print, and this was my first gold print, and that was a bit of a thrill. It was quite nice.
Yeah, great shot. Well done.
Thanks.
So, I mean, we're now just going to have a quick little advertisement from Luke from KL and representing Datacolor. We're just talking about the Spider lens cowl. Luke, just what's this all about, and why do we need that?
So why do we need the lens cowl? It's a device that allows us to basically check whether our camera is in focus or not in focus. So for the people when we're shooting wide open with, say, an f2.8 lens or a 1.4 lens or so on, we can focus on the target. We can actually then check whether our lens is back focusing or front focusing. So if you think your camera is in doubt, we can now actually check it with, you know, a very inexpensive device.
Yes, that's one thing worth looking at, because I've been with some of my cameras, I found that they weren't quite as sharp as I thought they were. And if you go in and you use your live view at 100% and manually focus, and then compare that shot with a shot taken with the autofocus system, and there's a difference, then you need a Spider lens cowl to fix things up.
Yep. That's it exactly.
Okie doke, thank you.
I could do with one of those.
So, Christian, talking a little bit more about capture and then following through into post-production. We've got a photograph taken out here in the Ruddle River National Park, and the beginning point was this shot. So I'm just flipping between the two, basically the raw capture, or the image that comes out of the raw processor, and then the final image, which you have obviously tweaked in Photoshop. Obviously, you're doing something with the raw processor. What are you using, and what are you looking for in the file before you pull it out of the raw processor and take it into Photoshop?
Yeah, well, I'm using Capture One, which is obviously the best software for the Phase 1 files. And you know, I don't use the raw processors probably as much as I probably could or should, but I generally like to get a file out that's reasonably flat, because I do a lot of pushing and pulling in Photoshop. So when I'm in Capture One, I make sure that all the levels are right. My white point and black point are fine. You know, you know, pretty much that. Just
so when you say the levels are right, you're looking at the histogram and making sure that it's not clipping, or?
Yes, that's right. I'm looking at the histogram. So I'm just making sure that, you know, when I get it into Photoshop and I start pushing it hard, increasing contrast and all that sort of stuff, I don't go making it any worse. So you know, I'm so used to Photoshop. I love Photoshop, and I've never really ever done much in the raw processors. Now I believe it is the better way to go, to do more in the raw processor, but I don't really have a vision of what I want to do with the file until I get into Photoshop. And generally, I've got a whole bag of tricks, and I just start running through them and go, okay, what does this do? What does this do? How does this look? What's that going to do to the image? And that's why I enjoy that. And also, there's a lot of masking and stuff I do in Photoshop, which you can only do there. You can't do it in the other programs.
It's a lot harder to do in...
that's right. It's not as sophisticated. So,
because programs like Lightroom and Capture One and Aperture as well obviously allow some layers techniques or some selective adjustments, but you prefer to do most of it in Photoshop and just come out with a flat file, which by, I guess you mean, is a low contrast file.
That's right. Yeah, because you can build all the contrast up in Photoshop, and you know, I mean, I could, like, a lot of the light in the foreground, I could have brush that through in Capture One. But it's it's just what I do now. And by doing this, I haven't noticed any degradation in my images. By not doing as much in the raw process. Maybe I could do it better, but this is my way of doing things, and that's what I always say to people whenever I'm teaching Photoshop. This may not be the best way to do something, but it works for me. If you want to see what the prints look like when they're made, then come to the gallery and have a look. So I've never really thought that I was doing anything that was that bad, and by doing it this way. But I mean, this image, I had a vision for this image which was to create something that had a kind of an old master painting sort of look. So I'm being heavily influenced by Tony Hewitt's texture work and stuff. So so I wanted to put texture on, new sky. I wanted to change the color and make it look a bit kind of browny looking. And I originally had this picture framed. We made a really massive print, and we had it framed in a.
It looked absolutely sensational too. It was really impressive.
Yeah, it only took about 2 years to sell, which was the biggest bummer, because no one wants a gold frame, which is what's wrong with
bring
people.
back the gold frames, isn't that right, Christian?
Yes, we want the gold. I think it's going to be the new thing. I mean, everyone's going for white, contemporary, simple, blah blah blah. But what happened to the big grandiose frames?
Look, Christian, I'm with you, and with our collective dress sense, to me, there's just no doubt that the gold frame is going to come back.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, in our houses anyway.
That's right. Yep. Although our wives do dress better than we do. Well, at least they dress better than I do, anyway. Yeah.
And they have great taste in men.
Yeah. So I also remember this shot, which we did on one of our ND5 excursions out with Tony, Michael, and Les, and this was shot in less than comfortable conditions. You might explain, how it was taken, and I'll just show the raw file at the same time.
Yes, this is a place called Stony Hill down in Albany in the southwest, and we got there and it was blowing. It must have been 30 knots, 30 to 40 knot southerlies. It was
a gale.
It was a gale. It was so hard to get anything sharp, and I think the reason I worked this image up because it was one of the only ones that was actually sharp in the whole time I was there. But what I wanted to do, I mean, the rock obviously was the hero, and whenever I'm taking photographs and trying to create something in Photoshop, I'm always trying to add the light to the area I want you to look at. So obviously the rock was the hero. So generally my images will be bleeding light on the outside in the raw file, and then by the time they're finished, it's dark around the outside. So it's got like a vignette, and then obviously the light will be hitting the subject matter, and then I'm working on color and I'm working on other things like that to increase it. Now, the vignette that I put on, a great tip that Tony told me was to make it irregular. So don't rub it on in a round circle, and just rub it into different areas, and it becomes more natural looking. So I've done a bit of that, and just mostly gone.
Sorry, I was just going to say one of the things I noticed is that the light on the rock is incredibly precise. How do you achieve that? How do you get so there's no overlapping?
Yeah, well, that's the important thing with Photoshop. You need to make it look reasonably realistic. Now, obviously, this isn't realistic because the rock is probably a little bit. Maybe I could have darkened it a little bit more around the edges and made it look like there was a spotlight. I had a flash gun or whatever on there, but again, this is just a bit of fun, but to get that sharp edge, you need to use Photoshop's tools, masking tools. So I'm using the quick selection tool. In this case, I use quick selection tool on this, and quick selection tool is probably not the best one. It's not the most accurate, but it does a really quick job. So I went in there and managed to pick up most of the rock, and then little areas that just need to be corrected, I just used the lasso tool and added to that selection. Once I had that selected, I save the selection, make sure that I don't lose it, because it takes time to do these things. And then I just go about, whenever I'm wanting to add light, I make sure that the area that I'm adding to is selected, and nothing else is selected. So then when you rub the light in, you're not getting any overlay, you're not getting any harsh edges, you're not getting halos and all that sort of stuff, which is the biggest problem with people just getting into Photoshop for the first time. But then obviously in the foreground there, you can you don't really need to mask that. You can use a feathered brush and just brush in where you think the light should fall, at places like that. But whenever you've got a hard object that's butting up to the horizon or the sky, the water, whatever, you need to make sure that your selections are perfect.
Yep, and it is perfect too. Looks great.
Yeah, thanks.
So this is another photograph up on the Pilbara, up Port Hedland, I think, and it's perhaps representative more of your earlier work and the overlay technique.
Yep, this was another Tony Hewitt-inspired texture, and we were up the Pilbara doing the Pilbara project, and I love this scene. I've always loved this spot because to me it's this toxic-looking wasteland. This is a Dampier Salt, and it's an overpass, so you've got a bit of height. So it's really nice to be able to get above the landscape because WA is so flat most of the time. So to be able to get a high above it. But I really love this image. I love the look. I love the telegraph poles. I love what's going on in the background, the road. So this one, I've done a lot of dodging and burning work. So all the witches' hats in the foreground and the poles on the wire fence, they're all dodged and burnt just to sort of give them a little bit more oomph, you know, a bit more make it pop, you know. Yeah.
And when you're sharpening the image, are you sharpening the image out of the raw processor or afterwards out of Photoshop?
I'm doing. I just use the default sharpening in Capture One, and then which I find to be really good anyway, and it works well with my phase files. But I do most of my sharpening afterwards when I go to make a print. So the files go into Photoshop. They don't get touched. They don't get sharpened. Sorry, they don't get sharpened until I decide on what sort of print I'm going to make, what size this will be, because each print size will need a slightly different amount of sharpening. Yep. So the bigger the print, probably the more sharpening you need, so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm using a new technique, new sharpening technique now that I found, which you will use Smart Sharp and Unsharp Mask and the what's the name filter, high pass filter, all at the same time. Yeah, so I've created an action so that I can just press the button now. It gives me a layer which I can then adjust that layer of sharpening to where I want. I can either brush the sharpening in or brush it out, or I can drop the opacity. So yeah, it's a good way.
And have you done a little movie or video on that?
Not on that one yet, no.
Not yet.
But okay. I do have other tutorials which have other sharpening techniques, my old sharpening techniques. This new one, I'll do a new one with a new sharpening technique
eventually, because I know we'll mention it later on that there's your workshops and movies website, so we'll touch on that later on. So now we've just got another quick advertisement from young Luke about we've got a couple of other products which are used for getting the right colour. Not that Christian necessarily uses correct colour or natural colour, but at least he starts with it if he needs to.
That's it. So the cube is one part of the system to do with the spider checker, which we'll probably cover off a bit later on. What the cube allows us to do, it can sit on top of the checker. You can actually use it as a lighting diagram. So if you see the silver chrome ball at the top, if we look very closely in there, we'll actually see there's two octa boxes. But what we can also do is if we're doing high key photography, we would select what would be on the right hand side of the image, or we can then do low key. And we can now set our black point, our middle grey, and then our white point. So basically setting like a curve up in Photoshop, Lightroom, Focus, or Capture One, allowing us to get our balances correctly at the beginning. Then when we tie it in with the checker where it can actually allow for a camera calibration, this is basically allowing users to match two cameras or different camera manufacturers, so something from like Canon to Nikon, and getting them very similar in contrast. So I believe that you've been using it, Peter, over some time.
Yes, indeed. And once I get that perfect colour, I follow Christian's approach and I screw it all up. This is from the Shark Bay project that we've done, and when I was flying over there I don't quite remember it being this colour, but maybe I was on a different flight to you.
Yeah, well it doesn't look colourful at all on my screen, mate. I don't know what you've done to my picture. I sent it over to you, it looked perfect. Screwed it all up. See, you do screw it with colour, don't you? Yeah, look, I love this shot because it's got little shark fins in it. It's Shark Bay, and I looked at that image and there was 2 or 3 different shark fins that, well, they look like shark fins. But this image,
no, I can see the shark fins. Yep.
Yes,
and I haven't had my afternoon sherry yet either.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, this was my favorite image from the show, but I haven't actually sold any of them. So, which is and as you might point out later on, Pete, that I am dragging my heels a little bit, and I've sold less than everybody. And of course, Tony's
I would never have said that, Christian.
Yeah. Oh, damn! I should have mentioned it then. But this image here, I use a technique. It was actually started off quite pretty and bright and nice kind of bluey colours and bluey greeny colours, but I wanted to really add a bit of grunge to it. So I use apply image and generally multiply the red channel, and that always gives me this nice desaturated look. It kind of grunges things up a bit, darkens it down, and then I start messing around with that. So I'll adjust the opacity of that layer, and then work on other areas, darken the outside again, lighten a few other bits and pieces.
And the apply image, and that is touched on in a couple of your videos, isn't it? Because I'm just mindful that we're telling people things here which some people understand, others don't, and just need them to have an opportunity to follow through if they're interested.
Yeah, definitely. I've got videos that a lot of my videos actually use this technique, because I use it quite often just to get that particular look that I wanted. And
so basically in Photoshop, under the image, I'm going from memory, under the image menu item, you can whiz down to apply image, and you select the red channel, and then the blend mode you apply to, or you just add
multiply.
Can't remember either.
It's multiply. It's just blend.
Multiply. That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
and that just basically blackens up the image, makes it a little bit more gritty and dark, and that's sort of, we've got quite an ominous, menacing feeling coming through in the photo. Yeah,
it's right. It does give it that kind of grungy look, and it can work so well with man-made stuff, And I tend to darken things down quite a lot, but I like to then not take that away. I leave that sort of grunginess there, but if I need to get some more light back out of the highlights, I'll just go in and do a curves layer, or I'll do a luminosity mask and try and bring some more detail out of the white, like the highlights, but just keep that kind of grunginess, the underlying sort of grungy sort of dark tones.
Okay, so they weren't all dark and grungy as this one shows. Is there a technique from shooting from the air? I mean, these were all done with the phase 1, the 80mm lens, and focus locked off manually on infinity.
Yes, well, you guys locked your focuses off, but I do mine all manually, because I'm so used to that lens, the 80mm Snyder, that I don't have any issues with just getting a sharp shot. But there was a couple of things that I found recently that do make a difference with aerial photography. Obviously, everyone knows that you've got to have a fast shutter speed. You've got to, the aperture is not so important. I mean, I was shooting f5.6 down to even f4 on some occasions, which is still fine on the phase 1 80mm lens. Sorry, the Snyder 80mm lens. But one thing I found was you've got to choose the height of your aeroplane, and sometimes it's much better to go higher if you've got a lot of turbulence around. And I remember on this particular Shark Bay flight, we were at about 3,000 feet, and the air was perfectly smooth. So I managed to get the camera down to 35 ISO on the phase 1, and
yep.
and I was shooting at 3/20th of a second, I think, something like that. So, but it was perfectly smooth and perfectly sharp. The images were fantastic. The other thing I found with doing aerial shots, if you're shooting anything that's linear, so if you've got shooting roads, for instance, or parallel roads, whatever, to stop them from converging, you need to be right over top of the image, over the shot where you're going to take. As soon as you take it on a slight angle, wherever it converges, it will get converges to the top, and it doesn't look any good. And it's really hard to bring that back in post and retain the quality of those edges. So, you need to basically turn the plane on its side, put it into a death spiral, and shoot as you're going down. that seems to work the best.
Not quite as bad as Jackie Rankin with her dad's Tiger Moth open top and being completely upside down shooting the frame.
That's right. Yeah. She did it even harder.
Jackie was always a show off, wasn't she?
She was, yes, she was, and she still is to this day. But of course, we couldn't do much of that because we had Tony Hewitt in the plane, and he was feeling a little bit sick. So he always got the front seat because he was a bit concerned about air sickness and all that. So, but I like the shot because it is a bit lighter and more cheery than I normally do. And what struck me was the colours of the salt, and that's why I liked it. But I sold this one at the exhibition, so I'm happy with that.
That's excellent. So one up and one down. But not all of the photos that you create are necessarily the ones that you want to sell. In fact, I know some of the photos you sell commercially, professionally, are not necessarily favourites at all. But you have this interest in what we call altered landscapes and Chinese restaurants, I believe.
Yeah, yes. Well, everyone likes Chinese food, and this was shot on the Pilbara project, and a lot of people don't get this. This kind of banal urban landscape, and I didn't get it at first either. And I've been trying to work out why I like these things, and I've sort of come to realise it takes me back to my youth when I was a young kid living in Coolbellup in Perth, which is a state housing area. It was all very banal. The buildings that were like this, the shopping centre was just hideous. It was just red brick, and there was no windows. There was no thought had gone into the design at all. So it's always, every time I see a scene like this Chinese restaurant, it actually inspires me, and I find myself drawn to it. I'm actually going to do an exhibition on banal images sometime in the future when I've got enough money that I can actually do that. But this Chinese restaurant really struck a chord with me, and I like the fact because it was in Karratha, and I like the fact that there's so many air conditioners there, which gives you an indication of how hot it is up there most of the year. The signs are all faded, the Coca-Cola sign, and the Universal Chinese Restaurant sign is just appalling, and you think to yourself, would I actually go into that place and eat? And of course Tony Hewitt did. He went in there and he survived that night, so yeah, he enjoyed it. I was waiting for him to spew up all night, but he survived it. But this is what I like. This an image that has a bit more of a story or maybe a message. I mean, I love beautiful landscapes, and I'm going to Iceland next year and Antarctica, and so we're going to see some beautiful stuff. I mean, you've been, and you're going again as well. But this sort of thing is everywhere, and it's neglected. It's not as people don't look at them as much as they probably could or should, and I like the fact that it's all, the colours are desaturated, the tones are always similar, and I do like the design. I quite like the shapes. So, and it's all very very flat on. It's
because it's
low graphic style.
It's quite interesting that you've got the light pole on the left, cutting right down the middle of the image. Whereas some people would say, well, don't be lazy, Christian, walk a little bit further forward and take the photo without it. But it works really well, the way that you've done it.
Yeah, no, I was just being lazy, Pete. No, I do like the poll there. And, unfortunately you weren't on this trip, because this was the trip when we were with Bill Fox, and he was the guy who was the curator of this whole exhibition. And when I started showing this, we showed him all our work, and all the stuff we were doing. We were trying to be fancy. Well, I mean, I'm saying for myself, I was trying to be fancy in Photoshop and put textures on things, and I was trying to make it look cool, and I was darkening and fiddling around with the light, and I just wasn't really getting what he was after. So he said to me, Christian, go out and photograph something that can't be seen. And that was the start of it all. So the next morning, because I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, next morning I got up and I was saying to myself, show me something that can't be seen, show me something that can't be seen. What is it? What is he talking about? And then I realised, it dawned upon me that it was about an image that had a story or a message or a mood or an atmosphere, something that told you more than just the obvious. And this is what, and this whole morning of getting in, it was a revelation. It made me change everything that I thought about photography, and made me realise that I can go out and take a photo like this, and I can be I can be successful in some way. And looking at the works of Gursky and Batinsky made me realise that I'm on the right track.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, rather than just being a straight record shot, it's something that people can either read your meaning or introduce their own meaning to. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and it's like that new topographics that we'd been talking about a little while back. It's all this sort of banal stuff, and you think about it. Everywhere you go, there's these shopping centres or light industrial areas, that have all these sort of scenes, and there's so many little compositions out there. And what I find about it that I like the most is that you're going somewhere which is quite average looking, and you're on an Easter egg hunt. We're looking for shots, and then all of a sudden you come around the corner and there's this Chinese restaurant, this old Coca-Cola sign. And in years to come, this will say more about us than a beautiful waterfall that doesn't change in a billion years sort of thing, I mean, this is
Okay.
a record of our civilization.
So
Make sense.
that might explain this particular image, which looks like a one of those model airplanes that you have in your. I shouldn't have said, everybody, that you've got a model airplanes, but
I got one for my son. I used to make this all the time. Yes.
Of course you have.
Yeah. I love them. Yeah, it's for my son, but I like to make them. Yeah, this was an aerial shot, and it's obviously a big plant. There's a big in some industrial complex that they're going to put together out of all these pipes and stuff. So when I saw this, I just about wet myself. It was just like, I know, I can't believe this is so good. This is the ultimate. The biggest problem I had is that I didn't realise that I should have been right overhead when I was taking all the shots. So a lot of them, the roads are all converging, and then they just didn't look right. So the other thing I came up with was that if you put them on a diagonal, you get away with a lot more. So any shots that were on a slight diagonal, like these roads, it didn't make it look so obvious and so bad. So I got away with that one. So I dodged a bullet there. But
okay.
this sort
One
of
of
shot.
the. Sorry, Christian, go on.
Are you going, mate?
I've got a little bit of a delay here, and so trying to time my interjections, but sometimes you start it up again by the time I get going.
Yeah, that's right.
But let me know. So what is this? I mean, this has got a most amazing colour. You showed me this print in Calamina Gorge the other day, and it really impressed me. Beautiful colours. What the hell is it?
Well, I'm assuming it's a tailings dam of some description. This is out at Lake Lefroy, out of Kambalda, south of Kalgoorlie, in Western Australia, and it was. I think it's either a nickel or a gold mine. I'm not sure which one. I mean, I can't tell from there. I mean, they're just big holes in the ground, with big machinery. But this one was amazing with just the texture. And when you see the big print, I've got a 60 by 80 inch print of this one in the back of my car at the moment, and the texture is like a crocodile skin in some of that area on the left. And then the colours of all the lakes and stuff. Now those colours are actually there, but you've just got to bring them out. So in post, you do, Pete, you increase the contrast, and it invariably brings the colour up anyway. And then I just sort of lighten some of these dams. Some of the water's a little bit dark in time, so I'll lighten that up. But most of the time, the colour is the colour is there. I have not altered the colour. I've just added a bit of saturation to some of it.
Looks fantastic.
And just the aerials, I mean, the beautiful abstract nature of what's going on. I think that man, in whatever they do, is artistic, and when you look at what happens in industry, these guys are making these machines that are sculptures. These are works of art. Someone's designed this thing, and that might be for a purpose, but in my mind, it's some sculptural piece that really is awesome and amazing to look at. Now, what they do on the ground, I mean, some of the other shots I've got in this new exhibition I'm doing at my gallery called Below, some of the scenes are they're so perfect, like in the structure, the way they've made the roads to go a certain way, the piles of sand they put out, they do look like someone's really thought out and said, oh, this is going to look great from there, let's do it like this, and it's just amazing. So I do a lot of my research on Google Earth when I'm going to do my aerials, and that's where I decide where I'm going to go, what I'm going to shoot.
Okay, Christian, that's been great. What we're going to do now is, of course, one of the things that both you and I need in our work is a correctly calibrated colour monitor. You and I both run the ASO monitors up there. We have the Wacom Cintiq in front of us. But how do we make sure that they look fantastic? And the short answer is we're using the Spider. So I'm going to get young Luke to, he's laughing at me because I'm doing such a good promo for him. He's going to give us a short little interlude, and while he's doing that, but while you're listening as well, we'd love to take a few questions if you want to type away there and shoot a few questions through to us. And after we've done the little advertorial, we'll come back and Christian and I will answer those questions. So Luke, I'm going to press the next slide.
Okay, so what we're talking here, or what we're seeing on screen, is the Spider 4 Elite, or even the Spider 4 Pro is basically the same shape. What this device allows us to do is actually, we put it on the screen, it hangs over the top of the monitor, it runs through, again, another series of color patches, and it makes sure our monitor is on the correct target for our, whether it's web, printing, video, or other other mobile devices as well.
So what you mean is the color that you're looking at, the contrast you're looking at, the exposure you're looking at is what your file is really all about, and there's no guessing.
Yeah, that's it. There's no guessing. There's no having to do reprint after reprint after reprint to try and get the same contrast of the screen. So we can see the difference between the well, basically the Elite and the Pro. They're actually the same hardware. It's actually the software that drives them. The Elite allows us a lot more control. So if we're someone like a Peter, where we need that extreme control for matching certain types of papers, that's where we would use the Elite. The Pro is a great starting point for us photographers, is where we can go through, still set for the standard 6500 Kelvin. So whether we're using an external lab, they'll normally say that they would like the file to be 6500 Kelvin, Adobe RGB, and what sort of brightness. Well, we can ensure that your screen will then help match the external lab. This is what we're seeing on screen, which is the full complete kit. Basically everything you need to go for your camera, your monitor, and your lens. So for all the money that we spend, all the expensive, I guess, camera gear, this is just a way of checking, and I guess keeping the other manufacturers honest as well. So yeah.
Thank you. For those who might be interested, Christian's got a website. You can just go to christianfletcher.com.au, and there's a link that'll take you through to his workshops and the videos that you can purchase and all that sort of stuff. You can grab a copy of my landscape photography masterclass. So we've got a 20% off with a code there, Datacolor, so that shouldn't be too hard to remember. So both the masterclass and the layers movies. Datacolor itself, if you ever need any help, go to datacolor.com/support, and there's amazing, lots of videos, information, how to do it, all that sort of stuff. If you like the way Christian and I give each other a hard time, we do the same with Tony Hewitt on our workshops. We've got one happening up in Kununurra, up in the Kimberley, and there's still room for people to join us, although you may have to find accommodation at a nearby hotel, as I think the rooms in the hotel we're staying in is sold out, but that won't be a problem, and there's still space if you're available. And finally, some of these great Spider products will be available. This slide will stay on for quite a while, so you can take down the details. 20% discount on any of the equipment that you see there, so offer available until the 18th of April. And we have a few questions coming through. And the first question, young Christian, that I have is, when you're doing these big 60 by 80 inch prints and you put them in the back of your car, do they go in the front seat or the back seat?
Well, I've got a van, so they go in the van, but this prints have been stuck down on a Kappa board, Kappa Fix, I think it's called. So it's a beautiful paper, it's a beautiful mounting board. It's like what we had at Shark Bay for the Shark Bay exhibition. So a great way to present your stuff. We use the Canson rag photographic paper, which is just beautiful. I use an Epson 11880 printer, and when you print that stuff out and put it on that really stiff 10mm foam board, they just look awesome. And so we're doing a lot of that. So yeah, I've just brought back a whole lot of stuff for my exhibition, which will be hanging on Friday.
Right. Okay.
But they go in the back.
They go in the back, huh? Okay. Now, someone asked about the 80mm lens that you've got. Is that like a 50mm lens on a 35mm DSLR, or a 35mm lens on an APS-C lens?
It is. Yes, it is. It's like the 50mm basically. So it's probably my favourite lens to use. I'm always using that lens, and if I had to make a choice, that would be the lens I would take every time.
Okay. Why do you think the square format for medium format digital has gone by the by? I mean, it's interesting. We all like square format photos from time to time, but our format window is a rectangle. Any suggestions for all the manufacturers who are listening to us?
I don't mind. I mean, it doesn't change the way I do things. I like the fact that we can have shoot a rectangle and squish it to a square. You know, I learned that from you, Pete. You know, to make a square, instead of cropping it, you can squish it all together. So you still got everything in the image, but it's just a little bit more pushed together, and I like that. So yeah, no dramas. I mean, I used to shoot with a Bronica SQAI, and that was square, 6x6 film, and that was, I found that a little bit limiting actually. I like to have a rectangle and then crop to a square if I want, because it just seems more natural for me anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think the majority of the manufacturers agree with you, I guess, and I suppose it's I don't know. It's a good question, but I haven't got an answer. So I guess it's a bit like the fairies at the end of the garden. Now, talking about pushing things around, when you're pushing your colours in images, is there a specific process or a set of steps in Photoshop that you use to either enhance or desaturate? And how do you know when you have gone far enough?
Well, when it starts to look like a Peter Eastway, you know you've gone too far.
Hey, that wasn't my question. That was someone actually asked that. Yeah.
No, actually,
Who
Pete,
was it who asked that? I need to dob them in. That was Paul. Paul Burgess asked me that question. So yeah.
Good question, Paul. Well done, mate. Pete, you've got the best. You have the best sense of colour style of any photographer out there. It's just your fashion sense that we're a little bit worried about. And then, of course, Tony Hewitt, he knows colour, but he doesn't know fashion either. But I mean, his shorts are very colourful, the ones that he was wearing at Carragini. But anyway, what I do is I'll change colour in different ways. I'll do using the Decam, Joseph Holmes Decam 3 profiles. Sometimes I'll go in and I'll change to a different chroma variant. I'll go in increase the saturation or the chroma, what do they call it, that way, which gives you that, it looks more saturated. Otherwise, I'll just do the normal hue saturation in Photoshop if I'm a little bit lazy. But then a lot of the time nowadays I'm converting the image to LAB mode and messing around with the A and B, the color channels in LAB mode, and that tends to give me a good opportunity to create nice saturation, which doesn't seem to block up the color too much. It can actually work quite well, and it also allows me to really mess with the color and start pushing and pulling the curve around there to separate the color out, making it just gives you a different look. So yeah, the LAB saturation method is probably one I use the most now.
Okay. With the hyperfocal focusing to get from front to back sharpenings, do you use that, or do you just use f16? I mean, how are you getting front to back sharp focus in your photographs?
Well, I'm always just using the best aperture, the sharpest aperture. So we all know that there's probably f8, f11, something like that. When I was shooting Canon, I was shooting f11, f13, and that was working okay. But when I went medium format with a big sensor, I realized I needed to do something a little bit better than that. So I'm using focus stacking. So I'll find the sharpest aperture for that lens, and then I'll focus stack, and I'll do up to 5 or 6 shots where I'll focus at my feet, take a shot, focus a little bit further in, take a shot, and I'll do that 6 times until I get to infinity. And that's focus stacking, and that's the ultimate way to get that beautiful depth of field and the sharpest images possible. And for me, it's all about that. I'm doing landscapes, I'm making massive prints. It needs to be sharp all the way through for what I like. And that's what that's fine, works the best. There's no, I wouldn't go to f16 or f22 or anything like that just to get a greater depth of field. It's all about choosing the sharpest aperture, because you don't want diffraction. It's f22, you're going to get diffraction.
Yeah, that f16 onwards, I understand it is that diffraction starts to hit in, which is basically a softening of the image. So while you get more depth of field, you're getting more depth of field, which is soft and fuzzy. So I normally find I'm stopping around f8 to f11 as well.
Yeah, it's funny actually. When I found out about diffraction for the first time, it was from you actually, Pete. I was mucking around. Someone gave me a Hasselblad H3D or something, And I'm an old boy from the old film days. I was shooting f45 on my GX617. God knows what that was doing to the images, but it seemed to work. And then I grabbed this Hasselblad, and I hadn't used one before, and first thing I did is I get out there, I set it to f32, I think it was on this particular lens I was using, and I took these shots and I got them back and put them on the computer. I'm like, this is absolute crap. So I rang you up and I said, hey, what's going on? This stupid camera. It's like, yeah, it should be sharp all the way through. I put it on f32. What's going on? And I could just imagine your eyes rolling back in your head, going, oh my god. Anyway, so you
never, Christian, never.
No, you said, Christian, just go
because
back down to
if I'm doing that to you, I just know what Les Walkling is doing to me.
Well, Les has a good excuse. He's smarter than everyone else on the planet, so we just have to accept it. We're going to upset him every now and then. But yes,
so how do you avoid that horrible banding when you're pushing and pulling the images quite a lot?
Boy, did you put these questions up, Pete? Because this is another one.
No, this one's from Charles, and he said that he's changed images to 16-bit, but he's still having problems. And I'm going to suggest maybe that his exposure wasn't exposed enough to the right in the first place, because if you're pushing those shadow areas, especially with a DSLR, you do struggle a little bit because there's not a lot of information there, and that's why we're exposure bracketing. Do you bracket much with your work?
Yes, I do. Even though I'm shooting with the phase, I'm always still bracketing my exposures. I'm trying to capture the best information I can. So I always expose the sky and then expose with the foreground. Now, invariably, if you put those two together, you're going to have some issues because the sky, if you've got a perfect sky with a perfect foreground, you put them together, it doesn't look perfect anymore. It looks wrong. So you had to adjust that. But as far as the banding issue goes, 16-bit will help. If you're having trouble with blues, blue seems to be the big problem most of the time. But I would suggest what Peter said, that obviously your exposures may not be perfect in the first place, and that can cause some issues. But it'd be interesting to see what you're doing and where that banding's occurring. If you're 16-bit, you should be pretty right.
Yeah, it normally is pretty right. It could also possibly be an issue with the monitor, if the monitor's not a good quality monitor. And there's also an issue where if you've got 20 layers or something like in that Photoshop, if you flatten the image and then have a look and see if you've still got banding, because sometimes it's just your screen struggling to render what Photoshop's sending it with all the layers there. But when you flatten it down, sometimes the banding disappears, and so the photo will be all right at the other end. So, right, Christian, when you're photographing from the air and you're going over commercial areas, do you seek permission from the landowner?
No. I don't know if
well, I know we haven't whenever we've done it.
No. Yeah, no, I haven't even thought about that. I mean, I'm not sure. Do they control? Do they own the air above?
It's an interesting question. I don't think with commercial properties that we have a major problem, to be honest, because it's in public view. Although Commonwealth reserves, like at Uluru and stuff like that, that could be a little bit different. I'd have to go and check on that. So I'm not 100% sure on the answer to that one. But I know that we haven't on a lot of them.
Was that asked by a lawyer? Was it?
Sorry, mate.
Was that asked by a lawyer? Do you know if he's a lawyer?
No, I think it was someone who owns the commercial property. He's going to sue us.
Yeah. Excellent.
So when you're starting off with your post-production, do you have a definite aim in mind, or do you just, the way it's been diplomatically asked is, do you have maintain a flexible approach?
Yes, definitely a flexible approach. I never go in, or actually some images I will go, okay, I'm going to make this a little bit more light, I'm a bit lighter, high key, a bit more cheery. Other ones, and it all goes with my mood, if I'm feeling depressed about something about my photos not selling or being, not coming up with anything that looks good, nothing that's going to ever beat Tony Hewitt to the top spot, that changes the way I edit. But most of the time I go in and I just start playing and I'll start messing with images. But certain images will work with certain technique or certain feeling, and that each certain image is going to need the light. Okay, this image here needs a light right there, it needs to be dark there. So you go in and you work all those things out. But most of the time it's just getting in and playing, and most of the time I'll do my editing at my fun stuff at night. During the day I'm obviously always working on business and emails and all that sort of stuff that takes you away from all the creative side. And then at night time I'll have dinner and kids will go to bed and I'll get in my office and then that's when I can have my fun. I usually stash a bottle of Drambuie up in the cupboard and I have a few nips of that, and then I have a few more nips of that, and then by the time I've had 5 or 6 nips of that, I'm really creative. getting some really good stuff.
So a couple of quick answers here. Exposure bracketing is when you take an exposure at normal or recommended, and then you underexpose, and then you overexpose, and you join the 3 exposures together using Photoshop and layers. So it basically lets you include a wider range of tonal values. And I normally recommend exposure bracketing at, say, 2 stops difference, because normally if it's 1 stop exposure bracketing, well, you've probably got that range already in the file that you've got. So 2 stops is what I recommend.
Yes.
There was when you were doing the focus stacking, which is similar sort of thing, it's bracketing but with a different focus setting. What software are you using, Christian, to join them together?
I'm using Helicon Focus. And
Helicon Focus?
Yeah,
okay.
simple program to use. You load the images, press play, does it, and it spits out. And I always just use the defaults, default settings, and then you just save the file to somewhere on your hard drive, and that's it, done. And it's really quick. I'm doing this on 5 phase shots, and it's much quicker than stitching. So yeah, it's great. Okay,
and do you use polarizing or ND filters, or is all of your correction done in post-production?
Yeah, never. I think polarizer is definitely valid in certain circumstances. Don't like what it does to skies so much, but I do like the fact that it takes the reflections out of the water. So, if I was out shooting the beach, I might put a polarizer on to get through the glare in the water. Then I'll take it off and shoot the sky and use that sky and that water. So you just combine them together. So I do that. ND filters, I use ND filters, not ND grad. So I just use the straight ND at 10 stop to slow things down and just get that kind of creative sort of vision, that kind of nice streaky water from the sky. That's really nice. And I think, Pete, you were one of the first people to be doing that sort of technique and creating those sort of images. So that's it. But generally, I don't use any filters at all. Mostly it's just I haven't even got a UV filter on my lenses.
One last quick question. What adhesive, if any, is used to mount the print to the substrate board?
It's well, to know that the board actually comes self-sticky, and it's all acid-free. Well, I'm assuming it is. My framer says it's all acid-free, so it's all archival.
Yep.
And Les uses it, so I'm assuming it's all okay.
It must be good.
It's okay. It's got to be. Yeah, it's got to be good. Yeah.
And the final question as we wrap up is, do you need an assistant? Obviously, the person asking this doesn't know what they're asking, do they?
No, I can't answer that one.
Christian, it's been fantastic chatting to you. Thank you very much for your time, and been great to have a chat. It's the first time I've actually had a sensible conversation with you for a long time.
I know.
It's been great.
We've had to be nice to each other, haven't we? But I do believe you've been very truthful, Pete, and all those nice things you said about me. So
I was indeed.
Yes, and then thank you guys for inviting me along. Thanks, Luke, and thanks to Datacolor and KL. And everyone else that's tuned in to listen to our...
Thank you, and if you're interested in some of the data products, there's that 20% discount. Oh, Luke's saying one more little thing. What do you want to say quickly, Luke?
Yes, there are some questions there that haven't been answered. Sorry that we couldn't get to everyone. What we're looking at doing is in probably about 2 weeks' time after Easter, is I'll get a list of these questions, and I'll probably actually run a webinar myself where I won't have you, Pete.
Yep.
So a bit nervous to be running by myself, and I'll actually try and go through and answer some of these questions for like the attendees, so we can go a little bit more in depth as well. So look forward to the date, follow it on Facebook, email out, usual sort of thing, and they'll be able to see when the dates are coming up. Cool.
Okay, sensational. I think we're a little bit more under control now than we were at the beginning. We were wondering whether we were going to be talking to anybody except ourselves at one stage. But we have mastered technology once again. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for coming along. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.